There is absolutely nothing out there that fails like faith. Just wanting something to be true, that doesn't make it true no matter how many times you stomp your feet and hold your breath. Faith fails fundamentally 100% of the times it's used. The religious simply refuse to acknowledge it. So let's spend a little time exploring why. I debate a lot of theists online. It almost always is a complete waste of my time, though, because theists are largely incapable of changing their minds about their emotionally held beliefs. They believe because it makes them feel good, and because it makes them feel good, they are convinced that they have to be right. Lather, rinse, repeat. Yet, it really isn't difficult to point out just how utterly indefensible their faith actually is. It won't matter to them, of course, but running around poking holes in their little smoke bubbles just might educate someone watching into realizing just how pointless faith happens to be. So here's my little take on it. I just got done with yet another long and arduous discussion with a Christian. It started off on Reddit, then it went to private posts, and then eventually to email because there just wasn't enough room to have a decent debate there. He had started out making claims about God, and I started asking, as usual, how the hell he knows that any of that is actually true. After all, he can provide no evidence that God is real, so why should I believe that he has any clue, outside of his own wishful thinking, what this God of his is actually like? And he responds that he has faith. Okay, and that means what exactly? Because this just opened him up to the revelation that faith means exactly nothing. Just because you really believe something strongly, that doesn't make the thing that you believe true. And that's why you can't just walk into a criminal trial and get up on the stand and say, "But Your Honor, I really believe that he did it," and expect to be taken seriously. Faith doesn't matter. Or rather, all faith means the same thing, which ultimately is nothing. It's all well and good that you have faith that God is real. Hindus, just to pull out a random example, have just as much faith that Krishna is real. Does that make Krishna exist? The answer, of course, is no, and my theist counterpart said as much. Just because Hindus believe, that doesn't mean that what they believe is real. Great, I'm glad you admitted that. Now, apply that to Christians. Just because Christians believe, that doesn't mean that what they believe is real. Same statement, just changed the name. And that goes for Muslims, it goes for Scientologists, it goes for ancient Greeks and Romans, you name it. Just because you hold a belief, no matter how strongly you hold it, that doesn't mean that what you believe is real. Of course, he didn't like that. So he kept trying to argue that Christian belief is more accurate than anyone else. Why? Well, he pulled out the Bible. It says so in the Bible. Well, it says that the Hindus are right in the Vedas. It says that the Muslims are right in the Quran. It says that the Greeks were right in Hesiod's Theogony. Lots of religious groups have books and stories that say they've got it all right. Do you believe them? No? Then why should anyone believe you? Just because you really like the stories in the Bible, that doesn't make the stories in the Bible true. That's the case with every single book out there. Tales existing on a page don't automatically become fact because you really want them to be. Being personally, emotionally invested in a story, that doesn't mean a thing. The people of those other faiths are every bit as personally, emotionally invested in their stories as you are in yours. So why do you think you get special dispensation? This guy went through all of the typical religious mumbo-jumbo that we always hear. I got an earful of all of the common religious philosophical arguments, along with the conclusion that they somehow prove that his God was real. No, it doesn't. Even if all of those arguments were true, and we all know that they're absolutely absurdly faulty and easy to destroy, but even if they were completely valid, that doesn't prove his God, period. The closest you might get is a God. Maybe, if you squint and look at it sideways. But it simply doesn't get you to the Christian God. That can only come from faith, and as I've already shown, faith is a meaningless sentiment. The rules apply to everyone, not just everyone else. It doesn't matter what you wish was true. It only matters what actually is true, and unfortunately for the religious, all of the religious, they have no way to objectively differentiate between their wishes and dreams and reality. And so long as that's the case, we have no reason whatsoever to pay any attention to their blind faith. This is why it's so important to point out just how useless faith is in discussions with the faithful. Faith is not an acceptable answer to any rational question under the sun. If it was, then anything that anyone has ever had faith in, ever, that must make them all just as true, right? Zeus, Odin, Thor, Xenu, Bigfoot, aliens, the Loch Ness Monster. It doesn't matter. If it's good for one, it's good for all. And nobody is ever going to buy into that, because it means that all gods must be considered equally real or equally false, because all believers have the exact same faith as everyone else. Faith doesn't make reality. It's why asking, "How do you know that?" so valuable in these debates. It makes them give you better answers, or at least you hope so. They have to believe for some reason other than because. The second they put that reason out there, all you have to do is point out just how many other religions believe entirely different things for the exact same reason, and ask them how they came to the conclusion that they did in a way that doesn't allow every other religion out there to do the exact same thing. And this makes them mad. It backs them into a corner, and eventually they realize that there's no way out. That pisses them off. It doesn't do what it ought to do, which is make them reconsider their position and recognize just how irrational it all is. No, that would be the preferable course, but it very rarely ever does that. They're so emotionally attached to their beliefs that even daring to ask themselves if they could be wrong, it makes their brains explode. So don't expect them to do that. It virtually never happens. Instead, it makes them blow up into a fit of rage. There's always a point where they realize that they've lost, and then they go off like a stick of dynamite. It's where you can expect to be screamed at impotently. It's where you can expect to be cussed at and threatened. And if you're doing this in person, I've seen people get physically attacked. Some of them, luckily, have enough wherewithal to step back, say something vaguely non-committal, and then just go throw their temper tantrum somewhere in private. But what you will never see, or very rarely see, is the theist who will not only admit that they were wrong, but actually change their position based on the complete and utter failure of their faith. So be warned, they will explode into a fury of irrationality. Watch out for punches if you're doing this in person. In this particular case, he threw some impotent religious threats my way. You're going to hell and God is going to get me someday. And then he just stopped responding. Okay, that's fine. By that time, I'd already won the battle, and I recognized a long time before that the war was ultimately unwinnable. This was, yet again, a theist incapable of thinking intellectually about their beliefs. That's pretty standard stuff, unfortunately. It was just one more example of the idiocy of religion and the feeble failure of faith. I don't remember the last time it actually went better than that. Can anybody out there give me examples of times where it's actually worked out better for you? Because faith, all faith, religious, political, you name it, it fails every single time it's trotted out. Nothing fails like faith. Faith proves nothing except your own gullibility. And you have to do better than that. At least try. Otherwise, you just reveal yourself to be a complete laughingstock. And that pretty much describes religion, doesn't it?
Bum